Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. The Commonwealth Cruiser event for early access is over, where you could pay money to get tech tree ships a little bit earlier, which means it's now a good time to start talking about it. I was initially thinking of just featuring the Delhi at tier 5, but because that one was sort of available through the event. But given that the event's now over, I can just freely feature the ships at the moment, so it's all good. Commonwealth Cruisers, new tech tree branch is it's obviously not yet going to be in the tech tree, so we don't even have a flag for it, but that is going to be a new section. And so far, this could be, I haven't looked into it, this could be a staggered release, or it could be literally just odd tiers. But we've had this before with the staggered releases, so right now the available ships are this thing. The Caradoc at tier 3, which is a Caledon class. We've got the Delhi, which is a Leander at tier 5. And we've got the Uganda, which is a Fiji, or one of the Fiji subclasses. And then we've got the Encounter, which is a heavy cruiser at tier 9, so more comparable to things like the Drake on the British tree. They are sort of British derivatives because they are Commonwealth cruisers. But let's have a quick look at the two more interesting ones, and that's going to be the tier 7 and the tier 9, just to get a feel for what these ships are all about and how they differ from the actual British cruiser line. Let's start out in tier 7, Uganda versus Fiji. First things first, the ship skills. Fiji, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the British light cruiser line, Fiji is a very good light cruiser, but the British light cruisers don't get high explosive shells. They only get armor-piercing shells. They do generally have smoke screens, single-fire torpedoes, which is sort of their gimmick, and lots of rapid-firing 150mm guns. The Uganda does get not the regular smoke screen. She gets the crawling smoke, which I am not opposed to. The crawling smoke is actually not bad, because it runs for over 30 seconds compared to the just over 30 seconds from the Smoke 1, but you can take it with you at half speed, however. So it's kind of a hybrid between the regular smoke screen, longer lasting smoke screen, and the fuel smoke. You can't sail in it at full speed, but you can sail in it at half speed and sort of take it with you. Or if you're running at full speed and you just leave it behind you, as long as it covers the line of sight to any kind of enemy ships, it works as well. So she gets an extra smoke screen compared to the Fiji, which is much welcome. She does get the same single-fire torpedoes, she does get the same defensive AA skill, but she gets a combat instruction, which is something that we've so far seen on the Spanish cruisers. And that combat instruction is activated by setting 3 fires, which is not actually that difficult, given that you actually get high explosive shells on these, unlike on the British cruisers. It reduces dispersion by 25%, so it's a precise aim 1 basically, but you also get turret traverse and shell velocity improvements, which is really nice, because that means for 20 seconds you become somewhat more accurate with this ship on after setting 3 fires. Now, if the target that you're shooting at is already on triple fire, you probably don't want to activate this, but you can save it up for when you need it. Just be aware that fires that you set while the combat instruction is active don't count towards the next cooldown. So after that is ended, you're going to need to set a couple of fires again. However, the statistics. First things first, the hull. The Uganda is a bit better armored than the Fiji, and still, however, is a light cruiser, so don't think that you can be doing things like bouncing battleship shells off it. She does get a little bit more in terms of hit points, but the maneuverability is atrocious. There, 18-second time to full speed. There are battleships that are more maneuverable than this thing. Horrible traverse, horrible engine, and horrible turn time on the rudder as well. And the top speed isn't quite as fast as the Fiji either. We get to what that means, but just keep that in mind for now. The guns are interesting because this is one of the Fiji subclasses that actually lost one of her turrets. So you only get 9 turrets instead of 9 guns or 9 barrels in 3 turrets, rather than the 12 on the Fiji. However, you get a faster base reload, a longer range, the same armor-piercing alpha, and a 6% fire chance on the high explosives, which if you have to compare that to the Brooklyn, which only gets 4, for example, but gets more guns in return, it's an interesting mix-up. The turrets are reasonably turnable. The ship, however, is not. So, yeah, that's something that you're really going to have to keep in mind. And we'll play around later. I'll be showing the style that you're going to have to play these ships. It's very different from what you do on the British light cruisers. Also, just a quick word on the armor-piercing shells. On paper, they look the same. In practice, they are very much not. The penetration on these armor-piercing shells is absolutely atrocious. And you're going to be having trouble penetrating cruisers. You can bounce armor-piercing shells off destroyers at mid to long range. So they really only are useful for mid to close range encounters against destroyers. Other than that, the armor-piercing shells are completely useless. Especially that they don't obviously set any fires, which means they don't lead you towards your combat instruction. The torpedoes are the same as on the Fiji, and they're there. You can use them at times, and they're actually quite useful. They reload reasonably quickly in only 38 seconds, so you can spit out a fair amount of them. And they are single fire as well. The AA, for all intents and purposes, is the same. It's minor variations, but you don't have a great AA. You're not an AA cruiser, but you can do a little bit of assistance if the defensive AA is up. But don't expect to go plane chasing. You are still very much... especially in this ship, because you don't have the maneuverability to actually dodge airdrop torpedoes. So I would see the AA as a sort of occasional use rather than something that you'd actively utilize. The surface detection, however, is noticeably better, which is making for a very tempting build, but we get to that in a second. First, let's compare the Encounter to the Drake, because the Encounter is the switch up to heavy cruisers. Now, we don't know if there is a tier 8 and what the tier 8 is going to be, light or heavy, but the British heavy cruisers don't have the best reputation, let me put it that way. So let's compare the Encounter to the Drake, and we're seeing a very similar pattern here. She doesn't get any of the gimmicks like the super heal and the extra health kit. She does get a better defensive AA. She gets the same defensive AA. She does not get a sonar, but she gets the extra smoke screen, and it is a crawling smoke too. So that is lasting forever, and we've got 3 charges of it, and she's gonna need it because same thing with the combat instruction. Although we do get a slightly better dispersion buff, the rest is the same. It's 3 fire activation. The whole pretty much the same for all intents and purposes, but the maneuverability is, well, again, absolutely atrocious. The British heavy cruisers are not particularly maneuverable. These things are in a whole different class. So these are cruisers in which you do not turn. They don't like to turn at all, which makes the additional smokescreen power very, very necessary. Although in Tier 9, this might be a double-edged sword, because it'll depend a little bit on what the guns are looking like. And the guns don't look that bad, because we do go down to the regular cruiser 8-inch guns, and we still have 9 of them. But we have a better range on it, which is already a massive improvement over the Drake. And we have a faster base reload. We do lose a bit obviously on the firepower, because these are smaller caliber. But better turret traverse, better range, and better reload, significantly better reload. I mean, we're talking like over 5-second base reload improvement here against the Drake. That, I'll take that any day. The torpedoes are sort of the same, only that for some reason here now we are suffering from longer reload. Given that, well, the torpedoes are sort of nice to have again. This is not a ship in which you want to be close to anything. We'll take it. The AA, once again, is sort of comparable, and the concealment is a bit better. So what do we have here? We have ships that play very, very different from the British light cruisers, and potentially the British heavy cruisers as well. These are fire starters. These are Aegis bombers. They actually play a lot more like Russian cruisers, honestly. And you have to compensate for the absolute horrendous maneuverability with careful positioning. You don't have much in terms of torpedo firepower, but the smoke screens are sort of what saves these ships. The combat instruction is a nice gimmick. It's nice to have. It mixes things up a bit, but the crawling smoke is what really so far drags this out. And I haven't played the encounter yet. I've only tested the Delhi and the Uganda. The Delhi at tier 5 does not get the combat instructions, but she does get the crawling smoke as well. And I think tier 5 was relatively easily obtainable, so you've probably seen that around, but not too many people play tier 5 regularly, so we'll be focusing on the upper tiers for now and what we know about it. So let's look a little closer at the Uganda and see what she can do. I am going to be sailing with the Seaborne Assault Camo because of the current ongoing issues with Wargaming's price increases and just general unhappiness about things. So I will be not promoting paying money into things. But if you are so inclined, and I'm going to show you, I'm not going to actually test it, but if you're so inclined to use the historical camouflage, it gives you main battery range, traverse speed, AA range we could do around without, max traverse speed, nice. It's a good one. At least the top half, the bottom half, kind of optional. I would have personally preferred potentially concealment instead of max traverse or something else. But anyway, a torpedo range maybe would have been neat as well. But it's an option if you want to purchase it. I can't tell you how much it is because press account is already there, so it's something that exists, and it doesn't actually look terrible. So not bad per se. We'll do more in-depth reviews with the ships in detail. I really just want to show you what the line can do at this point. Equipment-wise, so far on the tier 7, you got a couple of choices. Now you could go for main battery mod 1 for turret traverse. Personally, I'm going with the reload because HE spam is what these ships are all about. And with the combat instruction up, you actually get an improved turret traverse already. So, these ships will not out-turn their turrets easily. Let me just put it that way. We'll do something about the horrendous engine power in 2. And in 3, you got the choice. Either you can go for slightly improved steering, or you can go for better concealment. So, with this, you get the concealment down to under 7 kilometers, which is very good for a cruiser. And it would allow you to get into positions more easily. With the steering gear mod, once you start firing, and you will keep firing, so basically you're firing your guns every 5 seconds, which means for the rest of the battle you're basically perma-spotted, it allows you to maneuver and dodge a little bit better. And that, for me, is kind of the more important factor. I know that concealment is sort of meta at the moment, and a lot of people love concealment for good reason. But personally, at least in tier 7, I would go with steering. This might be a different story in tier 9, where you absolutely cannot be spotted in one of these floating. It's a floating port facility with guns on it, right? So we'll see how that thing plays later on. Captain skill-wise, what do you want to have? You can kind of lean into the air defense alert and just make the most out of it. It's an option. Alternatively, given that you don't get sonar, torpedo alert is also not a bad choice. And if you really don't care about the AA, Victorious Charge is a good one as well. You can focus on the heels because you don't have anything there, and Mistweaver is an obvious must. And then further down the line, I will have to test that at some point with APCS and see if that does something about the horrendous armor-piercing performance. IFHE usually not making a huge difference on 150 mils because the amount of penetration, even with the 15% buff, is never going to be enough to get through any armor plating. I could imagine that it would be more useful if you're firing at destroyers with IFHE and you just get full penetrations on the high explosive, because you can also charge up your combat instruction that way. And having better precision against an enemy destroyer when they're maneuvering, and faster shell velocity as well, is actually a really neat combo. So A couple of choices there that you have. But for now, we'll taking our relatively free-to-play Uganda into battle, and we will see what that thing can do, and if this is a good ship, and if this is a line that you should eventually grind. So just to reiterate, these are tech tree ships. They're free ships. Just because there's an event with early access only means that you pay money to get them 2 or 3 months ahead of time. Otherwise, you can usually grind them out. If you get a key from an event and you just manage to draw the ship out of the crates, all good. But if you want to spend money, then just be aware that these are tech tree ships that will be just grindable later on anyway. We are playing 87 round, so we're top tier. Domination on Trident. Nice map. I like that map. It is a carrier battle, however, against Erich Löwenhardt, a Hood, a Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, Bayern, New Orleans, and a Fubuki. One destroyer only, but it is a carrier battle, and we will see what we can do. We have an Ernst Gede on our side for cap control, but cap control is obviously going to be relatively important. Atlanta, New Mexico, Colorado on our side, plus we have an extra carrier with the Ise. So I think we've got the AA to spare, especially against the Löwenhardt. But let's see how this all turns out. Now, you have to be very careful early game with a ship like the Uganda with positioning, because you can't be too aggressive. You will absolutely be shut down, and you don't have the maneuverability to get out of that. So, given that the destroyer spawns on the other side, I'm going to have to rely on the carrier for scouting, and I am going to head towards A-Cup, but I'm very much going to position around the island here to make sure I have a way out of everything, because this thing doesn't accelerate very quickly, as you can see. It doesn't slow down very quickly either, and it does not turn around. Enemy carrier goes for A, friendly carrier scouts C, so we know what's coming. I don't know if the destroyer is coming here or not. There is a cruiser, battleship cruiser, and destroyers at A. Okay, so very well done. I don't know if this was the carrier or if this was the Ise doing the scouting, but good job on the scouting here. It is the only destroyer. Fubuki's on the other side, so we can concentrate on what we do best, which is this. Hello, Mr. Gneisenau. You look flammable. So let's get around. Let's see if we can dip our nose into the capture circle, and maybe get a couple of torpedoes away, because I do have the crawling smoke. But oops, there is the New Orleans. That's the good time for the crawling smoke, because that is a dangerous ship. So we're going to cover our turn here, and yeah, Gneisenau gets a couple of shots off, and New Orleans obviously targeting the smoke screen as well. So you do have to not sit still in your smoke, because it's a crawling smoke. You take it with you. Just go at half speed and you'll be good to go. But we have discouraged the New Orleans, because he probably knows that I have torpedoes, and have taken the capture circle. We've paid for it with half of our hit points very quickly, but it allows me to get out of there. Smoke's dissipating, so I'm undetected. New Orleans is going elsewhere, and that means I can now start trying to set fires on the hood instead, and just make myself useful over here. So you can dip your nose into smoke screens, into capture circles with the use of the smoke screens, but you have to be very careful. Okay, Gneisenau is pushing. This is the Asian server, so things go a little differently here. This is a position that you find yourself in very often. Kind of similar to an American heavy cruiser. Nose in, guns forward, and ship in reverse. And do not wiggle her around trying to get the rear turret on target. It is very dangerous. You're going to have to time it. So that's a double fire on the Gneisenau. I only need one more fire. Hidamakon's obviously double fire. I only need one more. There comes the New Orleans again, however. So I do have to turn. And keeping an eye with the torpedo indicator on what the Gneisenau is doing. I think Gneisenau is coming around. So let's shoot at the New Orleans, because we have nothing else to shoot at. And we are going to drop the torpedoes on the Gneisenau, and then again use the crawling smoke. And they'll just become invisible. That means we're going to lose the capture circle, but Gneisenau should still have his Damakon on cooldown. So if he takes a flood from these torpedoes, and there it is, that's a perma flood. That'll stick, and I need only one more fire for the combat instruction to come available. There it is. So now my combat instruction is ready, and we're going to use it straight away and see if I can get a triple fire going. There it is. Triple perma fire, perma flood, and that Gneisenau is dead. Now, to be fair, there's nothing he could do about it. He did Damakon the double fire. But that's kind of how you do damage. Synergy with carriers is always great. There come the Gneisenau torpedoes, but I'm already nose in, so no biggie. We're still just barely ahead on points because of the lack of capture circles. But I think it was the ESA which is now pushing into B, and I've got the New Orleans to deal with. Now New Orleans is a heavy cruiser and can absolutely shred me to pieces. So I am going to have to slow down. Again, can't push in New Orleans, not easily. I don't have the maneuverability or the alpha strike with the torpedoes to just take that thing out on a whim. I'm going to try and drop my torpedoes in his path anyway, and then again play the reverse the ship game, and turn around and point the nose towards the cruiser. You could say broadsiding New Orleans. You'd be tempted to use the armor piercing. Not worth it. New Orleans beaches and dodges the torpedoes, which is a little unfortunate, but at least now he knows that I have torpedoes. And as you can see, the high explosive is perfectly capable of actually penetrating a New Orleans if it has to in a couple of instances. And yes, that's the armor piercing. So crawling smoke up, and we're actually going to go forward, just a change of direction here. And New Orleans is coming about, so he is trying to get close and to try to actually, yep, he does the turn. So we lead the torpedoes because he's going to accelerate out of the turn. That's a fire, Damacon the fire, because he's on low hit points. And again, nose towards the ship. And AG spam. Let's see if we can get a permafire going. And you'd be really tempted to use armor piercing. It's not worth it. To stick with a high explosive. Only one torpedo hit because I haven't used the single fires. Otherwise he'd be dead already. Okay, we'll switch to the armor piercing just to finish him off here because we're not getting another fire. And see if the carrier's there earlier. But as you can see, even at this range, the armor piercing only does semi-pens. So you may as well use the high explosive. There's the Scharnhorst. Scharnhorst is the last enemy ship alive. We've only lost one battleship on ours, so no Roffelstump medal for us. But yeah, that's effectively how you play the Uganda. Very, very different from how you would play a Fiji. And yeah, don't try to kite. You don't have the maneuverability for it, and the guns are all positioned forward. You're much better off staying at distance and HE spam from the front. And at that, the ship is actually really good, especially due to the crawling smokes, which are really excellent. So for these kind of situations, where you can keep the enemy at arm's length, you can rack up a fair amount of damage, actually. If you are having more fluent situations and lots of destroyers, things are very different because the ship has the maneuverability of a harbor facility with guns on it. So don't try to dodge torpedoes in that thing. The AA is not enough to protect you from enemy carriers on your own, especially if you're bottom tier. So stick with your team, play at range, maybe dip your nose into a capture circle if the coast is clear, but always be ready on the fuel smoke and ready to disengage. And the Mistweaver is an absolute must-have, and it makes the ship really, really makes the effect of the fuse of the crawling smoke really, really good. So I enjoy that ship. Now I am somewhat biased towards cruisers anyway, but. If you're okay with the British heavy cruisers or with with the Soviet Russian cruiser line, then you're probably finding yourself, or maybe with French cruisers, then you might find yourself in somewhat familiar territory, and I think it's a good addition. I'm enjoying this. It's sufficiently unique that it's not just a copy-paste from the existing British cruisers. And I'm looking forward to see what the tier 9 can do. And if this is okay, we're going to have to stop at tier 7 or 8. or if the top tiers are worth it. Because this was a tier 6, 7 match. It's very different if you're pulling the same stance on tier 10. Where a Vermont looks at you funny from the other end of the map, you have no chance of dodging, and there goes your cruiser. So we'll have to see how that works out. But the tier 7 is great fun. The tier 5 isn't bad either. So interesting addition, and seems reasonably balanced all in all, with a nice strengths and weaknesses. Anyway, that's it for me today. Thanks everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.